Let's get rid of this thing. So, fuja dienen. You came from speaking about? You came from speaking about? Oh, well, then I did a hell bloody lecture in Scots. We didn't need to bother about the English language at all. But I doubt if you'll be able to keep up with me, so I better switch the neural software. Scots is a very ancient language. It's not really the same as English. We still speak it here and there. But today I will attempt to do the whole thing in English. I hope you understand me. Apparently it's the last talk of the day, and so I thank you for your patience in this hot day. And how can I follow these acts that have come up? I mean, come on. I've been hearing about all these amazing dudes and all this incredible information, and I'm wondering, what can I offer? And she's just told me what I'm going to speak about, so I hope I can speak about it. I don't really have a specific claim to fame, like a lot of our other distinguished speakers who've spent a lot of their life in one area and really got a lot of juicy information that we all require. And so before I even start, I'd like to thank all of the other speakers for providing all of us with information that you're definitely not going to get anywhere else. I'm clear about that. So what's my claim to fame, and what do I have to offer the proceedings? Think, Lord, think. Actually, maybe a slightly different perspective on this whole issue of sovereignty, which came up in my brain about a year ago. A year and a half ago, you weren't hearing this term, sovereignty or sovereign individuality. It really wasn't moving around. However, since I talked here last year on the subject of remote viewing, this issue of personal sovereignty, individual sovereignty, has arisen, it appears, and there's a great deal of information there about it. Now, the title of today's talk is Sovereignty Against All Odds. Now, the second part is the tricky part. You all know about sovereignty. You're all extremely aware of what's going down on this planet. I think the most conservative way to talk about what's going on this planet right now is it is being hijacked. Our planet is in the process of being hijacked. And you all know who the main perpetrators of the hijacking apparently are. You don't need me to reinvent a wheel and tell you all about the Federal Reserve and the tax scam and everything else, because other people have been telling you that very brilliantly, I'm sure. So you're aware of these issues already. What have I been doing in this realm that may assist you? Today's talk comes thanks to Leonardo da Vinci. So I'm going to start off with a bit of a book plug, because last year I talked about remote viewing. Some of you may be familiar with remote viewing. I'm not going to reinvent that one. Remote viewing is basically the activation of your innate ability to use your God-given brain to tune in to any source of information, anywhere, anytime, multidimensionally. That's what remote viewing is. Now, this was kept under covers by a certain intelligence agency, which developed the technology for any human being to be able to, much like a radio, tune in to any frequency in the multidimensional universe. This is what's actually parked on top of everybody's shoulders. It's a gigantic multidimensional super Cray computer. And part of the strategies to keep us enslaved, a large part of the strategies to keep us enslaved, has been based on not allowing you to access the information to open up this, which is apparently now working at about 1 or 2% capability. Just think about that, folks. I hesitate to say even our most brilliant speakers are probably only on about 5 or 6%. However, in the next very short time, you're going to see this multidimensional computer get switched on big time. You're the one who's going to do the switching on, so we'll talk about that. Which brings us back to Leonardo da Vinci. I found a book this year, a popular book, selling quite well, titled How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci. Now, you all know that Leonardo was both a left brain and a right brain genius. He was an artist. He was also a scientist. He used both sides of his brain fully. Thus, he was a quote-unquote genius, an incredible man. I found out a lot of other things about Leonardo da Vinci. For example, he was very possibly the head of a secret society at that time in Europe that connects to the Prairie de Sion and all of that, right? Those guys in those days, the alchemists, the magicians, they knew that this is a device for communicating multidimensionally through all space and time. They used it, especially the Renaissance artists. So usually when I prepare a talk, I write a bunch of notes, but this time I put it in color. There's the whole talk there. This is based on Leonardo da Vinci's idea of what's called brain mapping or mind mapping. You take a topic that you want to talk about or you want to find out about, you start slapping symbols on the paper, and the next thing you know, you've got an idea. Sparks new ideas, colors, images, sensations. This is what remote viewing is actually all about. Subtly picking up on information that in our normal state of consciousness we're not aware of. Now, as you were told earlier, part of my particular quote-unquote expertise revolves around altered states of consciousness. Remote viewing is actually an altered state of consciousness. It's not your ordinary state of consciousness. It's slightly different. What brought me into this field of endeavor? Why did I start studying about all of these issues that the other speakers have shared with you? Because I come from a country where nobody listens to authority. Scotland. Nobody. It's just the way it is. You know, I was at school. My school was founded in 1235. Can you imagine going to a school founded in 1235? And guess who was probably behind the foundation of the very first university in Europe, I think? Around that time was the good old Knights Templar. So there's a lot of stories come together, I find out, from my own country. It's taken me a long time to get there via the rest of the world and Egypt and all of these other ancient cultures. I get back to my own country and I find we have a tradition of not putting up with anybody's shite, as we call it. Right? I'm not putting up with your shite. And I don't care if this school is founded in the 2nd century and you've got a long black cape and a big hat and you've got a PhD. I'm not listening to you because your authority doesn't work in my world. So we had a whole school of people like this. It was bananas. And the only way they could control us, get out here. And they take out a huge leather strap with 3 prongs, you know, which doesn't even bend over when you hold it out. It's so thick. Get out here. And then it's torture in front of all your buddies. So I come from authoritarianism, anti-authoritarianism, and at the same time, Scotland's behind a lot of the strategies somehow that are going on this planet. Because if you've done your research, you'll find out you can trace a lot of the stuff that you're talking here back to the good old UK. So we've got both aspects there in this old country. I do a lot of traveling. So what I have to offer you today, ladies and gentlemen, is basically 10 years of constant, non-stop traveling, both with the meat machine here. I've taken the meat machine everywhere. Everywhere you can imagine, non-stop. Every month I'm in a different country. And most of the traveling revolves around visiting ancient archaeological sites. For example, March, the equinox, I was at Chichen Itza in the Yucatan in Mexico. Now, does anybody know what happens on the equinox in Chichen Itza, which is a Toltec pyramid shaped like this? What happens? Only on the equinoxes is an incredible phenomenon. It's called the serpent of light or the Kukulkan, whereby the sun positions itself in such a way that there's an illusion created that an actual serpent is descending the stairs of the pyramid, coming from heaven to earth. And at the bottom of the pyramid, there's a stone head. So this serpent symbolizes knowledge, cosmic intelligence, wisdom. It visits twice a year, only on the equinox, which of course makes you wonder how the ancient Toltecs knew exactly how to position the pyramid. I was there. There was about 40,000 people there. It was absolutely unbelievable. You can catch the event for about 2 days. It's not exactly 1 day, but 2 days around the equinox. First day we went, there's a cloud. I thought, this is very symbolic. We're not going to see it. There's this empty sky, and we're just waiting, 40,000 of us. It starts at the top. You see this, it's an isosceles triangle shape that is caused by the pyramid interacting with the sun to make it appear as if a serpent is slowly descending. It takes about 2.5 hours. This light comes down, and when the whole thing appears, everybody goes bananas. But this year, on the first day, cloud comes. We only caught the tail. So we better come back tomorrow and do some big work here and concentrate. We went back the next day. It was spectacular. Just as this phenomenon had completed, 40,000 people in unison. It was like that scene out of Spielberg's movie when about the UFO, Close Encounters, when they're in India, remember? And they ask all the Indian people arrayed out on the plane, where did it come from? And they went, yeah. Well, everybody, 40,000 of them, when this phenomenon happened, they just all went, ah! 40,000 of them. Can you imagine? I mean, you heard out here what we did today. And nobody planned it, nobody orchestrated it, nobody said, now you've all got to go, ah! It's a spontaneous response to a cosmic phenomenon. It's a spontaneous response. So, when I say that I have been traveling a lot, it hasn't just been with the meat machine. I've been researching ancient cultures for 10 years and actually taken this body to Peru, to Mexico, to the Celtic sites in England, Ireland, and Scotland, to Hawaii, to Australia, to the Aboriginal sites, visiting these places, reading about them, studying about them, but more importantly, getting to these places, sitting down in these places, and doing what I call ceremony. That means that a group of people get together and they focus their intention to learn something about this place. Most recently, we were on top of a very unknown, newly discovered Mayan pyramid near the Guatemalan border of southern Yucatan. To get there takes about 2 hours on a dirt road. Nearly all of the pyramids now, of course, wherever you go in the world, full of tourists and cameras and pictures, you know. Nobody's paying any attention or thinking about this, you know. And they've got the tourist police. This is interesting. The tourist police are there to stop you doing one thing. The tourist police are there to stop you doing what we want to do, which is to do ceremony. Which means human beings in an area which they know to be of very strong, powerful energies created by people who had a lot up here in between their ear holes for a purpose, right? To be used, to be activated for purposes of evolution, if I can use that word. The tourist police are there to stop you doing that. You can eat your hamburgers, you can drink your Coke, you can sing and dance. But if you do anything in the least bit spiritual or ceremonial, you'll have 4 or 5 Mexican guards come up and go, you can't do this here. I said, excuse me? I'm on top of a pyramid with my wife doing a ceremony. These guys said, you can't do this. Now that's kind of symptomatic of our problem and symptomatic of this talk's title, which is Sovereignty Against All Odds. Why should people be so concerned about a small group in a sacred place doing something like that? The reason is very obvious. Because a small group of people working in a gigantic power zone can create a lot of energy. It amplifies it. If you get a couple of hundred people doing a ceremony in front of a pyramid like that, and they know what they're doing and they know the timing, they can shift stuff big time. We've seen it happen. We've seen it happen. We've seen the weather change. Miracles have occurred. A small group of people doing this. So I've been trotting around the planet for 10 years, mainly with a couple of dozen Japanese in tow, because for those of you who may not have heard me last year, I spend most of my time in Japan. There's a reason for that. Japan is an example of the most, now this is on video, I better watch what I'm saying because I love the people and I love the land. Japan, if you want to see where we are going with our current situation and the enslavement of the people, if you want to see where that's going, go to Japan. Because that's the most tightly sewn up, completely controlled, utterly all taken care of in a box, and you ain't getting out. 130 million people bamboozled. And most of it happened since 1945. Before 1945, the Japanese people were full of piss and vinegar. You couldn't tell them what to do. You all walk down the street this way, and your lunchbox is this color, and your skirt is this long. And you say, yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full, sir. That's the reality of Japan. It is the Orwellian dream come true. It is happening. Now, you don't hear this. It just, oh, well, Japan's a modern nation, you know, they have a great economy and all the rest of it. Start going there and seeing how it works. It's the perfect pyramidal society. An incredibly tiny bunch of people at the top have got it all wrapped up to the extent that when I start talking to people there about tax issues and the government, I mean, I can talk stuff about ancient cultures, and they'll go, yeah. And then I say, have you thought about why you're paying tax? And they'll go, oh, but we can't do that. We can't say anything against the government in this country. I say, why the hell not? What's the matter with you? I mean, we'll do this and we'll do that, but we don't want to rock a boat. You know, this is a society of harmony. And I just turn right around and say, this is a society of total domination by a small group of people. So there I was in Tokyo about 5 months ago, a huge audience, because I'm a kind of an unusual item, you know, because I talk like this in Japanese. And I just tell them exactly what I'm finding out. And I tell them, hey, you're about to be totally sewn up in a bag and thrown off the edge of a ship, and your planet's getting hijacked, and this is how it's happening. And hello, why are you still watching TV and buying Louis Gucci bags? You got about a year left here. You know, there's 130 million of you in this tiny little rock. And if shit hits the fan, this rock's going to wobble. So why did I do it in Japan? Because these are such talented, brilliant, intelligent, skillful people who have a really good moral basis, but they're all sewn up. They're working on 1% of their capability. They're so busy running around in a rat trap. You've no idea how hard people work in Japan. You people couldn't stay a day with an average Japanese. You'd be on your knees by 5 p.m. They get up at 4 o'clock, get on a train for 3 hours, with another 800,000 people, get to their work, and it's yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full, sir. All day long. You can't express yourself. You can't tell people how you feel. You've got to knuckle down because what do they say? The nail that sticks out must be hammered down. They have ads on the subway where there's this respectable 50-year-old golfer that everybody loves, and his message is, obey the rules. I think, well, that's just bloody great. And they all look at this guy, yes, if he says it, it must be true. So, you wonder how this happened. You wonder how this happened. These guys were slashing Westerners' heads off before the war. They were 4'2" and they had more energy than this whole room put together. They were incredibly powerful, spiritual, amazing people, and now you just see 130 worms. I'm sorry. That's the reality. And if you think it's bad here, go there and check it out, because that's the future. That's how it works when you've got a homogeneous nation. When everybody shares the same DNA, they all got black hair, it's easier. It's a bit harder with us because we're all mixed up, you know. And there's people like us around. It makes it slightly more tricky. But there, no bother. So something happened in 1945. Some guy with a pipe came strutting in there. MacArthur. Changed the Constitution, changed the whole deal. Very skillfully done. And right now, Japan, according to the top researcher in Japan, who, like, I haven't met this great gentleman Eustace yet, but there's a Japanese equivalent of him. And he's really done his homework. He's particularly focused on the Middle East. But he's done his homework, and he said, from this year, Japan is now entirely and completely a slave state. We lost it. Our economy has been taken over, totally. There is no way the Japanese economy will ever recover. It has been planned that way. So, I'm standing in the, used to be the socialist headquarters, the Japan Socialist Party's headquarters, giving a talk in Japanese, throwing up slides about ancient cultures, and I look out the window, and you cannot believe what I saw out the window. Because out the window is the Japanese parliament buildings. I'm right next to the parliament buildings in, of all exquisitely synchronistic places, the socialist headquarters of the Japanese Socialist Party, you know, and socialism is just I just start going like this when I hear that word, when I see what's happening, you know, stay on the tit forever. And I look out the bloody window, and I'm looking out the window, and there's the Japanese parliament buildings, which were renewed after the war. And guess what's sitting on the bloody top of the Japanese parliament buildings? A pyramid! A truncated bloody pyramid at that. And I'm going, is this real? I never noticed this before. I've been in Tokyo so many times. They've got a pyramid on top of the Houses of Parliament, minus the wee bitty at the top called the capstone. Now, where have you seen that before? So, do not think that this program is just limited to the American-European areas principally. It is endemic all through the planet, and you can see the throttlers coming in very clearly in Japan now, and they're using the economic tools to do it in Japan. The people are really in straitjackets there now. It's a very serious situation. Every Monday morning, half a dozen guys jump in front of a train. And it's not a national sport either. They're jumping in front of the train so they won't come back to the office in the afternoon. And it's like business as usual. How many guys jump in front of the train? Oh, a few heads here and a few legs there. Let's pick them up. This is happening because the poor guys have got nowhere to go. Ever since the war, they have been rigidly trained to obey and to do one thing, to do their work. Now the companies are all falling. People are getting laid off, and nobody has told them how to reinvent themselves. And I suppose what I'm really going to talk about today is how we're going to reinvent ourselves, because the odds appear to be stacked extremely highly against us. This is a small group. This is a very rare group, I would dare to imagine. Most people haven't got these kind of ideas. And nobody's got them in Japan. Or if they do, they don't act on them. It all remains in a back compartment of, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. Japan's really big on conspiracy theory, by the way. And guess who's behind all the major conspiracies according to the Japanese? Come on. Take that guess. No, not the Americans, no. You see, in Japan, they can give lectures like this to thousands of people, and they won't have any defamation league coming in and banging them on the head because nobody bloody understands what they're saying. Nobody understands what these lectures are about. Most of their conspiracy lectures are all about the Jews. It's the Jews that's behind it all. They run the Federal Reserve. It's the Jews. It's the white Jews. It's not the real Jews. It's the white Jews. I mean, you try doing that here, right? You'll have every league that's ever been invented to shut people up on your doorstep. They do it in Japan openly. So nearly every Japanese businessman clearly knows about the Federal Reserve. They know exactly how the Bank of Japan is controlled and all the rest of it. But it doesn't make any difference. They go to work, they come back, they're exhausted. You need energy for transformation, right? You need energy. These people are knackered. Day in, day in, day in, day in. Pop, 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 pop. Now, we're lucky. You're lucky here in this country. Still, you got time. That most precious of commodities, and also the commodity that's running out real quick. So, where's my perspective in all of this? I've been traveling, but I haven't only been traveling with the meat machine. I've been doing a lot of personal adventuring, let's call it, into altered states of consciousness. Now, whoever came up with that ridiculous expression, altered states of consciousness? This state of consciousness is about as altered as it gets. I mean, we really believe that we are mortals. We really believe in this whole materialistic scientific gizmo that was foisted upon us. We were trained to believe in mortality and powerlessness. It is a program that has been going on for thousands of years. And there I will agree with some of dear David Icke's material. We worked together in England a few years ago, and he's got some good stuff. As far as I can see, as far as I can see, 10 years of research in this. And I said I'm not a specialist. I don't just do one area. Here it's physics. Here it's entheogenic research, which is the polite name for altered states of consciousness research. I've been in the economic, the political area too. I've been doing a lot of work in tax, thanks to people like dear Alex and others. It's coming from lots of different areas. I'm just putting together bits of the puzzle here, right? I don't have the whole puzzle. Nobody has the whole puzzle. Lynn Buchanan, who's a famous American remote viewer, said, it doesn't matter how good you get at this game. You'll know some of the story. Maybe you'll know a lot of the story, but you'll never get all of it. Never. Not from one source. You have to figure that out for yourself. Nobody's going to give you the whole picture. But here's the picture that I found. Having been in Peru, having been in Mexico, having visited these astonishing buildings, and I was about to tell you about the place we were in near the Guatemalan jungle, an entirely, totally preserved Mayan pyramidal city center in the middle of the jungle, untouched, no tourists, no coke, no police, nothing, right? When we climbed that pyramid, the first thing we noticed was the steps were this big, right? I thought, this is interesting. They must have really been a bunch of hard arses, deliberately knackering everybody's knee joints so they could get to the top every day. Why would they do that? I put up a pyramid like this. It's this big. I thought, oh, maybe they weren't the same size as us. And actually, we found inscriptions on some of the stones there that were very ancient, that were parts of bodies that no longer existed. But I measured my leg against the one, which was a full-size one. The guy's thigh bone was up to here. So there's a piece of information I thought, ooh, maybe they were all about 7'5". Now, where did they tell us about this in history? These gigantic people, huge. And when you look at this pyramid, you go, oh, we couldn't do this. So we get to the top of the pyramid, nobody there, jungle for hundreds of square kilometers, and we do a ceremony. Now, guess what the top of pyramids are supposed to be for? The top of a pyramid is where heaven joins earth, right? Here's earth, here's heaven, and here's you smack on the top. So if you get your act together and figure out that you've got a serious question to resolve or a serious prayer to pray or whatever, you get yourself to the top of a pyramid and make sure there's no tourist guards around, and you spend about an hour there, and I guarantee there will be a lot of information downloads into your system, into your DNA itself, because a lot of this story has to do with DNA. And that's why the symbol for today's talk looks like this. If you go all the way back, and I'm sure you're very familiar with this, I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. You go all the way back through our ancient history to the flood, pre-flood, and you go back, you, of course, will discover that there were gigantic human beings in every sense around at that time. And you take it a little bit step farther, and you start moving beyond the ken of merely human knowledge, and you start interacting with something that is maybe not local to our little wee part of the galaxy here. And of course, I'm talking about, and unfortunately, the gentleman who brought this information, who's Zechariah Sitchin. His wife is seriously ill now. I hope she's okay. But Zechariah Sitchin, of course, is the great student of ancient languages, particularly Hebrew, but more importantly, he's one of the few people who can read cuneiform script. Nobody's been able to read this stuff that was left for us, you know, until 20 years ago. And now we've got thousands of cylinder seals with all of the information stamped on them. And guess what it's saying? It's saying, hey, just like the Egyptians said later on, the gods used to hang out here. The gods. They called them the gods. Vastly powerful beings. Even said where it came from. But I'm not going to go into all that now. The point is, there were two major energy streams started many, many thousands of years ago. One of these energy streams, shall we call it, or consciousnesses, was one of the sons of the king Anu. King Anu was the king of a planet called Nibiru. It's beginning to sound like science fiction. The 12th planet, the planet that NASA knows all about. And they've known about it for a long time. This is a gigantic planet about the size of